All right, friends, I'm super excited for who we have on the show today. I'm sitting here with my new friend, Neha. Neha, welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you so much for having me.
For women who haven't gotten to meet you yet, can you tell us who you are, what you do, and I would love to hear a fun fact about you if you can pull one out for us.
Sure. So I live in New York City with my two kids, age is almost 10 and almost 7, Bodhi and Lila. And then we have a dog, Coconut. And, I started what was then Mother Untitled as a platform to explore what it felt like as an ambitious woman who was choosing to pause my career, initially downshift to make room for family life at the height of the lean in movement, the height of the girl boss era. And it's grown into this book and movement, helping redefine what it means to be ambitious and reclaim that sort of transitional period around work and family. Fun fact, I actually took my first pause, my power pause after high school. I ended up knowing that something wasn't feeling 100% aligned. And it was like the wisest thing I could do as an 18-year-old was leave for India. And I taught there. I trekked in the Himalayas. I went to Thailand and Malaysia and Singapore and Australia. And I came back just with sort of a greater sense of self and what really mattered. And it's so fascinating to now find that sort of 20 years later.
That is fantastic. I love that. So tell us about the book. It's called The Power Pause, How to Plan a Career Break After Kids and Come Back Stronger Than Ever, which I feel like every mom hearing that, every woman hearing that subtitle is like, okay, I need to know more because this is what I've been, like, this is what my heart's been hoping for, I think. So tell us a little bit about the book.
Yeah. So the book, it's so interesting because I wrote it. If you sort of walk through chapter by chapter, it was really my lived experience of redefining for myself all of these tropes who have been handed down about career breaks for family life, right? So it walks through that sort of first initial phase of figuring out your identity as an ambitious feminist woman, feeling financially dignified, feeling connected to the long game of your career. And then there's this middle section, which I loved, which was the years of like actually getting my footing with my kids and figuring out how to feel like I myself was moving forward, having rhythms that felt like I was, productive but not burned out, feeling like I could get help, which was such a big one for me. And then the last section is this really about the sort of piece of knowledge and wisdom I want everyone to recognize about this stage of life, which is there's so much possibility that we underestimated, right? We were told that our networks die, that our creativity and our ideas expire, that this is a career dead end. And actually there's, if you can be creative about these non-traditional spaces in parenthood, we actually can expand our network, expand our interests, and put together a really interesting career portfolio on the other side. And so the book is one part my personal narrative, one part all of these incredible interviews with over 100 women across the country, and a lot of data and research and scripts and practical tools to really make the power pause your own.
I love that. Well, so the women who are listening we are all over the board. There are some women who are already moms. There are some women who motherhood is not something they're interested in. Then there are a lot of women who are, looking ahead at their life saying, someday I'd like to be a mom. And all of us were in this season of life that I call the everything era, where it's like this kind of decade-ish long time of life where you're having to figure out so many pieces of your life all at the same time. And one of the pieces that can feel the most mutually exclusive is children and career. And so I know that some of the women listening are like, I'm feeling that in my bones right now. Some women are going, I'm anticipating that. And then I think some women are, which is probably, I think where I was like, I've grown up thinking I can be anything and everything all at the same time. And so is this really a thing? Like, is this still a thing? Like the war between stay-at-home moms and, moms that work traditional jobs. So I want to hear from you to start out. Give us like the problem. What does this look like today? What's the reality that women are facing as they come into, parenthood while also having a traditional career?
I think the problem is changing. I think we've seen a lot of progress, but then, of course, when you see progress, you see new problems. But I can tell you that after a decade of doing this, we are looking at a very different climate than we were in 2015 and 2016. I think that we are, and in part due to the power pause and colleagues of mine, I think we're putting more options on the table around work and family and softening the edges around what's expected in the workforce while raising a family, accepting the fact that there may need to be periods of downshift. But I'll tell you that I think there's a couple of things. We stepped into women and work in the 1970s, really, right? Like coming off of World War II, women had taken on the vacated roles from the war. And then we woke up to the fact that, like, we wanted more of that. We wanted to make money. We wanted to feel empowered. And so we saw the rise of second wave feminism, which basically the undue side effect was that while we proved our capacity in the workforce, we pitted women in the workforce who were ambitious against women who are doing care work in the home as traditionalists. Now, at the exact same moment in time, we were seeing the boom of media, meaning on TVs across the country, people were watching the show Leave It to Beaver with June Cleaver, who is this sort of wonderful, idyllic, apron-clad in servitude to her family shut-in archetype. And then we saw a lot of print advertising around vacuum cleaners and dishwashers with this sort of woman in the pink apron on the corded phone with a platter of cookies. And so that became the image, the sort of upper middle class image associated with stay-at-home mother. And we never updated the perception. That was fiction then, by the way, but we never updated the perception 30, 40, 50 years later for the reality that women are now aging into motherhood at a different stage, right? Meaning they are often having kids later than their 1970s counterparts. So they're coming in with a foundation of work and education experience. They're getting married later in far less traditional constructs, meaning that actually we're looking at the research, dads are spending 3 times the amount of time with their kids than any generation before. So it's not like these women are serving their partners cocktails at the end of the day. And there's this huge new opportunity in entrepreneurship and freelance and consulting and fractional work and content creation that just opens up a vast gray area between the old ideas of stay at home and working. So a lot of my work has been updating the perception. And it's not just the rebranding of stay-at-home motherhood, it's the dismantling of the binary of stay-at-home and working. Because the reality is that in our research, and we commissioned a survey in 2023 of the general population, as well as 1,200 at-home parents. And what we saw is 1 in 3 women working out of the home will pause their career in the next 2 years. 1 in 2 will downshift their working hours. And 90% of the women on pause aim to return back to the workforce. So what you see is this much more fluid narrative where we're actually really ever evolving and ever shifting. And I think that's the exciting moment we're in. It can often feel like the messy middle because we're doing a lot of advocacy and sort of paving new paths and fighting old tropes. And that's the conversation we're having, which is how do we sort of dispel the old tropes to pave these new paths forward so that the women coming up behind us have new paths available to them.
I love that. Talk to us about painting with a broad brush, I guess, just because I know that there are some women listening that don't have this, don't have this context. Why would you want to or need to shift your career at all when you have kids?
So I'm going to start with my personal, right? Which is not most people's personal experience, is my personal experience. I had clocked in a decade in brand marketing. I'd gone to Stanford Business School. I had landed what on paper was my dream job, running brand at a tech company. And then I had my first child. And I was rocking with him in the wee hours of the night. And I'm not going to paint like rose-colored lenses. I was covered in milk from overproduction issues. I was sleep deprived. It was 3:00 in the morning. And by the way, this was at 4 months postpartum, which means I'm painting a picture that you're still like, it's still very messy. I didn't have things figured out. But the one thing I did feel was for the first time in a long time, I felt like a sense of curiosity around like, how does this little brain work? Like, I want to know more. I want to learn, and I want more time with him. And I really like this sort of peaceful, content version of myself, and I want to figure her out. I share that because there is no research to show that there is a right choice for your children. Children thrive whether you work out of the home or in the home or exist in between. I chose for myself because that was what I felt would let me be the happiest version of myself with my child at that moment. Now, the data shows that the most common reasons women pause their careers is first, more time with their kids. Second is less stress in the home. So if you think of households, two household earners working the way Americans work, right? We're looking at and trying to raise a child. We hear women say, like, we just want a little bit more space to be able to manage this in a peaceful way. The third reason is the cost of childcare and financial considerations. So I think for a lot of people, the assumption has always been that stay-at-home motherhood, or as I like to think about it, as career pauses or shifts for family life, is a luxury. The reality is 1 in 3 women feel forced to pause their careers because of the cost of childcare. 60% cite financial considerations. So when I offer that, it's to say that these are often not one or the other. It's usually a nuanced personal decision. It also doesn't just happen when the child is a baby. We often see people pause or shift their career to make more time when they're adding another child and they're just trying to figure out either the childcare or the logistics. We see like high rate of diagnosis right now between the ages of 9 and 13 around neurodiversity. So that could be ADHD, that could be dyslexia, that could be mental health issues. And people pause and shift to make room to like manage the care around that. And so there's no one time to pause. There's no one right reason, but I think parenthood has been dumbed down for so long to diapers and laundry when really it demands a lot of headspace. Demands a lot of emotional regulation in the day-to-day of parenthood. Sometimes you're looking at complicated situations with children and there's finances involved. These are complicated circumstances that follow us in family life. And we often don't understand that when we're stepping into parenthood. But what we want is parents to say, okay, as a joint household organization, what's the best choice for us right now? How might we be able to access the right care or the right time or the right resources to help our family thrive in this chapter? And how might we then be able to reevaluate over and over again?
I love that. There are two things that you said that I want to highlight and just like point out again because they were so like revolutionary for me and also freeing for me. So that you said that there is no evidence that kids are better off with a parent with in any scenario. If kids are loved and taken care of, they are good to go. So having one parent at home, having no parent, like whatever scenario you can come up with. And I really looked into that. That was something that was really important to me because it feels, or I guess depending on, the community you grow up in or what your mom did before you, it can feel like there's one right answer. And like you're a terrible mom if you work outside the home, if you don't work outside the home. And I should point out, I don't think men struggle with this at all, which is a conversation for another day. But there is just no evidence that kids are better off one way or another. That set me free in like an incredible way. And then the other thing that I'm so glad that you pointed out is when it comes to the decision of whether to be a stay-at-home mom or not, it's often a financial decision. And so there are women in my life that I know would love to stay at home and their family cannot operate on one income. So it is not an option. And then I have probably equal as many friends who would like to continue with their careers. They want to pursue their careers, but they've done the math and their family, like they feel like they're spending so much of their income on childcare that the juice isn't worth the squeeze at that point. And so it's not always a moral decision. It's not a values decision. It's not a preference decision. A lot of times it's just a financial decision and the decision looks different for everybody.
I also want to just say it's also not a finite decision, right? Like the piece around the women pausing and shifting and then ultimately returning to the workforce. I think we often feel like, well, once I'm a stay at home mom, it's over. And the whole point of this book and this movement is to say, you're choosing to shift your priorities for a chapter, right?
Yes.
Not necessarily your priorities, but your time and your energy to focus on a different set of priorities. And ideally, you're able to use this time to grow in other ways. And by the way, once you spend like a minute with children, you'll realize they push you to grow because you just have to develop the patience and the capacity and the efficiency and the time management and the leadership to be able to work through it. But you are going to grow, and then it may actually change your perspective and your interests such that it helps redirect where you want to go next. But I think this idea, whether it's about finances, whether it's about what you need or want in your home at the moment, these are all subject to change over and over again. As your circumstances change, as your job changes, as your children grow. I have been a part-time working parent. I have been fully at home. I have worked part-time on my own thing, and I have worked full-time on my own thing. I can tell you my kids were all right and loved no matter what. And I can tell you that one of the greatest gifts is that they now understand that at different school years, we're going to have a family admin meeting and we're going to talk about what feels different, what's happening, what we're all working on. And I always say the greatest success of this book and this movement will be if one day someone asks my daughter, was your mom a stay-at-home or working parent? And she'll be like, what are you talking about? Like, she won't know what that means. She'll just know I was there. I worked on a lot of different things. I loved her very much.
Like, does anyone else listening want to cry right now? Because that is so
No.
beautiful. That is so beautiful. So I want to walk through kind of the progression of the decisions that we have to make. As we are going into parenthood, maybe we're trying to forecast, maybe we're pregnant and we're trying to forecast, what the plan is, or maybe we're 4 months in and we're about to, our maternity leave, whatever that looks like, is about to end. We're trying to figure out what's next. What are some of the signposts, I guess, we would look for on either side or things to notice to help us make this decision of like, do I take a pause? Do I downshift? Do I upshift? Is that a thing?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, it is. Dial up. I usually say dial up, but everyone has it. I think so much of this is an inner knowing in your family unit of something's not working or I'm craving, something feels off. I don't, one of the things that makes me feel like not sad, but when I have like a 25-year-old or 27-year-old or 28-year-old who isn't even dating someone yet, come to a book event and say, should I do anything different in my career to set myself up? And I would say, absolutely not. You do you. Enjoy it. Enjoy giving this thing that you care about right now that is a big priority. Everything you want to give it.
Yeah.
Because that is a foundation of experience that does not go away. It goes with you. I'm so glad I worked my ass off in my 20s and early 30s because it was the foundation that then gave me more options to build on, even if you're pivoting later, right? And so I wanted to share that with anyone who is listening who does not yet have children, is you're like, enjoy this moment in your life, dig in, dive in, understand yourself, because that's what you're doing in all these seasons is just understanding yourself. And just like we changed from when we were age 5 to 50 and 15 to 25, 25 to 35 and on, we're always going to be evolving. Motherhood is no different than that. So enjoy this current season of yourself. It will serve you. I think the next piece is for the women who are maybe pregnant and on maternity leave. I think there's a lot of sadness that we have to recognize in our culture around the paid family leave. No one should be making, or lack thereof, no one should be making a decision around whether they return to work or not return to work at 2 weeks postpartum or 6 weeks postpartum. This is going to seem a bit counterintuitive, but I often encourage women who are sort of on the line, who don't know yet what they want to do, to almost do like a test period, to give themselves to go back, but in their head, treat it as a micro test. Like, how might they feel? How do they feel? How might they have conversations with mentors or managers or women in their industry about other ways in which they can optimize for what they want? They might go back to work and say, actually, this 9 to 5 thing is perfect. Like, my job allows me the headspace to be able to focus. And then I go home and I can focus on that. And it's actually working great. Others may say, I really want like 3 dedicated days at home or and how might they use that maternity leave or that transitional period, to explore that option and actually present plans to their managers. I encourage women to actually sometimes, if they don't see the model within their company, to call other friends in similar industries who've worked a part-time schedule and literally go to their manager with a trial plan. Like, this is how this would work. You're not on the hook to give me anything, but I'd love to try it out for a few weeks or months, right? I think holding transitional periods in short increments of time where you're reevaluating at like 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 6 weeks, just reduces the pressure on having to make a big decision. I do think this sort of gray area, the part-time, if you are passionate about what you do, if you enjoy your manager, I do think it's important to explore those options. I do think the unlock is when we can talk to each other and find those templates for how this might work. I think if you are later on in your parenting journey and you are feeling like something's not working, I really need either more headspace or I need more time. There's a couple different things you can do. I think what's interesting is I had a number of women come to the tour who were working full time, but they'd offloaded their management duties, for example. They basically figured out that they loved what they did. They just needed more headspace. There were other people who said, like what we talked about, they negotiated a part-time role. There were others who said, I'm going to take a full pause, but I'm going to give myself like 3 months to 6 months to financially plan for this with my partner, as well as start to vocalize this within my company so that we can either figure out a different solution or I'm setting them up for success so that I have a bridge to come back on the other side, right? And that's a lot of what the book, that front end of the book is about, that first 3 chapters, which is once you make peace with identity and your sense of ambition, it's how do you have conversations with your partner to make sure you're safe in making this decision. I've had couples who said that they essentially for 6 months took her salary and put it in a savings account for her so they could trial what it felt like to live on one income. Mm-hmm. There were others who did a massive move like you, who went from San Francisco to Virginia Beach because of the cost of living, because it was important to them. There were mm-hmm. others who said, you know what, when we plan out our budget for all we have to do is actually cut out travel and we can make this work, right? So they're mm-hmm. making a choice together. But mm-hmm. the key part of that is together. They're deciding that whatever decision they're making, their joint household unit, it's a benefit to the whole household. Their interdependence, the person working out of the home or continuing to work out of the home is still dependent on the partner doing all of that emotional care work, right? And we want to make sure while we're planning, while we're thinking about that our marriage is sound or our partnership is sound and that we are going to feel safe in this decision. So there's a number of sort of scripts and templates in the book and those sections to just have the conversations with your partner, network your way through your existing company so that you either can explore the middle ground options or you're essentially like keeping those connections open to you when and if you return.
I feel like as I'm putting myself in this position, that's the gnawing fear in my gut is how do I return? Like it, and I feel like I've heard, people say things about like, having a really hard time getting a job again after being out of the workforce, or like, I feel like that's kind of the phrase that comes up, which is so crazy. Like, what do you think a stay-at-home mom does? Like, she's running a company is what she's doing. Also, I feel like in order to be a diplomat, you should have to live with toddlers for a while. Like, is there better diplomatic training?
No, Nancy Pelosi said that actually during the first Trump administration, regardless of your politics, by the way. I just thought it was an interesting anecdote because I don't know if you know that she spent she was a lawyer, but then she took 18 years off to raise her 5 children. And she didn't actually start in politics. She volunteered in the PTA. And through the PTA, she met someone who had a congressional seat who gave her her congressional seat when her last child went to college. And, or yeah, correct. And then from there, she sort of built her career. But she said during that sort of 2016 to 2020 era that nothing trained her better than her time rearing children. And I think that that is the part that is completely underestimated. It's obviously a lot of what we're doing in our advocacy, but I do think a lot of this is also, while we can pay it lip service, and I want people to really ingest, I want hiring managers to really understand this, it's still on us to own our story and do things strategically, right? Like it's still on us to, when we're resigning, like I said, network on our way out, right? I always say to people, as soon as you part with your last role, I did not do this. I really wish I did. Um, update your resume, update your LinkedIn because it's still fresh. Like all those big client wins, all those projects you delivered, all those events you exit, like it's still top of mind. And so you can paint it with a different amount of color. And it's a way of dignifying all of that experience that goes with you. So to your point about getting back in, I think I think the ultimate reframe is that this is a career portfolio. It's not a ladder anymore. So you're taking, say, 10 years of marketing experience or theater experience or accounting experience. You're taking that with you. And then you're stepping into this next chapter. And from sort of a low touch way, you can use LinkedIn, for example, and just 20 minutes a week, nudge your contacts a little bit, show them that you're engaged, like their content, and you're staying top of mind. You could say, be more diligent and say, every quarter, I'm going to go out for coffee with someone in my industry just so I stay attuned. But I think the key part to acknowledge, and we can get into this a little bit more, but is to know that this stage of life, when we talked about the middle section around getting your footing, isn't just about your kids. It's also about you. You're growing alongside your kids. You're setting, and that's why that section starts with setting your own metrics of success and goal posts. Because oftentimes we step into the stage and we're like, I guess like my family's happiness is my measure of success. But we owe it to ourselves when we're making an intentional choice with our career to say, well, we're also making room for ourselves to grow. And when we feel that nudge, there's like a number of different exercises I talk about. But I think one of the key ways is say, assign yourself a professional, personal, and family goal for this chapter. And it can change year over year. And under that, it can be really small increments, right? Like if you are at home with toddlers, like, there's only so much you can do. But say your professional goal is, for me, it was to write, to get back into writing. It was 3 blog posts a week. I could do that. Mm-hmm. That was attainable to me. And it also made me feel like the time wasn't happening to me, that I was moving myself forward. The reason this is relevant is when we go back to that career portfolio concept, the other thing I encourage women to do is keep a Google Doc list or an iPhone notes list of like the moments that light you up, the things you feel proud of. It could be volunteering at your friend's benefit. It could be helping, like being a thought partner to your husband or partner in their work. It could be negotiating a tantrum. The dots will seem really random, but when you look back, they tend to leave clues as to like where you want to go next, but also start to tell a story that fit into that non-traditional chapter. So I'll give you the example of this woman down in North Carolina who reorganized a bus route for her kids because they weren't getting picked up. It did 2 things. It left a clue for her when she was looking back at that list that she was interested in project management. It helped her sort of fine-tune her interests. And when she went to update her LinkedIn and it said career pause for family life or career sabbatical for family life, under that, she talked about orchestrating a family relocation, but she talked about that bus route. She said, or implemented highly technical infrastructure change to local organization. Right? She took that seemingly ordinary thing that all of us have done in the backdrop of motherhood. She connected the dots to what she wanted to do next. And I say this because it is on us to own our story. It's on us to be able to walk through this stage of life intentionally looking for what we want to, how we want to grow, noticing that we are growing, and then using the resources available to us, whether it's the book or elsewhere, to put that story together.
That's I love that. I'm like, my mind is flooded with things that I have either done or seen moms do that I'm like, if you think that doesn't translate to like any sort of organization, like if that's not an organizational skill, I don't know what is.
Yeah.
How likely is it that we're going to bring our resumes, like having used this time to grow and redefine what we're interested in and making note of the amazing things that we're doing and putting those on our resume? Like, how likely is it that we're going to send our resume to someone and they go, okay, well, so you haven't been working for the last 5 years? Like, is that still common?
So 69% of hiring managers as of 2022 said that they were comfortable with seeing a career pause. And that obviously changed post pandemic. That is like a big jump because there was in part, it was the sort of layoffs that happened over the course of the last 2 years. The cost of childcare has definitely become more of a focus. So there's more of a dialogue around why women are pausing, or men, by the way. 1 in 5 stay-at-home parents are dads. So I think that actually helps.
Yeah.
I will tell you that while I wish I could say like put stay-at-home mom and like childhood development on your resume, I think that there are more strategic ways to think about this, right? So when you're sending that resume, I think you can go the career sabbatical route. And I think you can build out, I think you can talk very specifically about career related endeavors, right? Ran PTO organization, volunteered at local Congress, facilitated marketing focus group for local law firm. Well, there's a number of examples I lay out in the book, but that, I'm giving you a sampling of ways in which you can take these experiences that don't need to be paid. They don't need to be year-long committed things, but they're relevant to give you a talk track for what you're going to put there. The other piece of that is if you're writing career sabbatical, your best bet is to go to small to medium business as a stepping stone. A warm lead, meaning you're going through your best network is the mom friends that you make on the playgrounds and play spaces, right? So for about a year out, you want to start your search about a year out, and you want to start to build out the experiences. So if you're saying, I was in marketing, I want to go back, this would be a great time to take an online certification in AI, right? Or an online certification. So you're essentially using this 1 year to fill in the hard skills, and you're also using it to network strategically, where you might start to say to your mom's group or your book club or your PTA line or, your husband's work friends, like, I'm looking for my next thing. This is what I'm looking for, because it's often through our friends that we get our next role. Okay. You're going to be able to jump the line, which you need to mitigate the risk. Now, there's a part 2 of this, which is, I think, and this is a bit controversial, but I really believe it, if you have been freelancing, if you have been working on some sort of content project or platform, if you have been helping even in a unpaid capacity in a nonprofit or a friend's business, you don't need to write career sabbatical for family life, right? Freelancer, these are my clients. You could have been freelancing for 10 hours in an entire year. They don't need to know. Yes, I think we sometimes think that I think women by nature, we are honest. We want to explain all the nuance, but it's really important to do two things. One is to own with clarity why you made the choice. I relocated my family to Spain. I'm raising my kids. I took a break. These are the ways I stayed connected. Let's move it on. And I think from a professional perspective, we can talk about the professional skills that we maintained in really strategic ways that are relevant to the hiring manager. The last thing I would say about the small to medium businesses is the research shows that female hiring managers will be just a greater, you just have an easier leg up in that context. I personally am very bullish on this future economy where mom owned businesses. You see more women leaving their career pauses, pivoting into entrepreneurial ventures. I think it's interesting that they then hire women in fractional capacities because they understand that 10 hours of a woman's time who has raised children or is currently raising children is more effective than truly many. And so I think that sort of sub ecosystem is getting really interesting now.
I love that. Oh, that gives me so much the options. I feel like my word of the year is options. Like how can we just uncover all of the gray and all of the different colors that are available to us? It can feel like life is really black and white, but it's not, or it doesn't have to be. And so I'm just really grateful for all of the in between. The last thing I want to ask you about is finances, because that is a complicated thing in a partnership. I know that you talked about really planning with your partner. Is there anything that we need to be aware of when it comes to retirement planning or just making sure that we're taken care of? Also, I know that I have many friends who struggle with the financial aspect, feeling like they are not, almost like it's not their money when their partners are not communicating that at all. But I think it is hard to be a partner that is doing so much, but you almost you don't have like the gold sticker to show for it. So talk to us about money.
Okay. So let's start with the foundational reframe, right? That we are an interdependent organization. I think the thing that scares most women and keeps us from using the money or not using the money if we're not working for pay is this idea of contribution and value and financial dependency. And the reality, and this goes back to what we were talking about in terms of the cost of childcare right now, we know that someone needs to do the care. Like someone is going to take care of these children. Someone has to keep the home clean. Someone has to be dealing with the food prep. Someone has to be managing this child's school enrollments and their doctor's appointments and their camp signups and their activities and their emotional and social and psychological development. And in the case of neurodivergent children or children with special medical needs, someone needs to be managing that. Okay. So now we're going to sit down and we're going to say, well, how are we doing that? And we may decide as an interdependent household. And my husband and I, to his credit, even before we had children, he had us running our home like a business. Like we had a P&L, there was income in, there was income out based on a series of different things that we were budgeting against our values, right? So whether that be travel, whether that be health, whether that be food, whether that be dining out. And so when we had a child, it was not easy, but we had a practice in place where we could say, all right, I could continue to work and this would be our income. We could model out, this would be our income in. And then who is doing what in the home? And at the time he was running a tech company. He was on a flight to San Francisco, maybe like once a week, if not more than that. He could get on that flight to San Francisco because he had the security net that I was always going to be available to take care of these children, right? In that way, he depended on my ability and my availability and my desire to manage the home front. So he could single task on building that company. And we really had to have a lot of deliberate conversations around that. It's why I spend so much time. It's the second chapter in the book is having those scripts. Because here's the thing, if you are not going through that exercise, what happens is it's going to come up in weird ways. And it's going to come up with you feeling like, oh, I don't have access to the money, or I can't ask for help because I think my sole value is this. I think that foundational belief that we not only depend on each other, but that we both deserve to be healthy and whole, because otherwise this whole thing falls apart, then allows us to also think about childcare or food delivery services or a meal prep or a babysitter as an investment, not out of the mom's salary or lack thereof, but out of the joint household income, because we are both contributing, whether it's paid or unpaid. Now, the call out on this and the very large box, big gray box on whatever page that is in the book, is that if you start to feel, and you'll feel it in your gut, like something's not clicking, like he's not, or he or she's not fully bought into this mindset, or like the marriage is feeling just a bit too on the rocks to feel safe, this might not be the time to fully pause. You may want to stay connected to some degree of income, and you might want to explore in the ways we talked about, a part-time or freelance role, right? Or two, you might consider bringing in, and we have resources on the site. We have financial planners to have these conversations. But you might consider bringing in a financial coach or relationships counselor to shore up the marriage, but also to talk through this dialogue, which can feel tricky. Or if in the case of, say, the child has medical needs or there's something going on, one of you actually does need to pause, but you're still not feeling safe, this might be a great time to write a postnuptial agreement, right? Like, we have shied away from prenups and postnups in this culture because we fear talking about money. A postnup isn't you betting against your marriage. It's you putting together a contract just like you would in any important job to say, like, I am stepping in and providing this care. I want to make sure I feel safe because it'll let me do my job better. And so, there's a lot there that is very personal to the marriage, but I think the foundational mindset is the piece that you need to know that you're bought into.
Mm-hmm. Talk to me about, because I think most people don't talk about, like, what's at stake. So like, if you're not safe, like if you don't have, but like, we've never ever said the words postnup on the show before, because I think most people talk about prenups and not postnups, but you're right. Like, no one talks about it. Why? Like, what is the scenario that you're guarding against? What happens if what happens?
Well, we are seeing a lot of policy change in this front, so I don't want to fearmonger too much. I think in most states right now, it's pretty 50-50. I think where we run into issue is if there's a divorce, right? And someone has been out of work doing the care work, and money has not been sort of an open dialogue, so they don't know that money was was held in trusts or held in some sort of safeguarded situation, such that they don't have access to it, right? And I think a lot of having these financial conversations up front in a marriage or in a partnership is, you're entering such a complicated time in your life where this is the most complicated organization you're going to run and the longest organization you're going to run. And you need to treat it with that care. And I think going in without a plan then leaves you suddenly scratching your head, feeling like, oh, what's going to happen? Like, those worries are going to brew. And if there's not open dialogue, then you're going to walk through the stage of life feeling nervous. And I think we obviously want to see marriages succeed if they're meant to succeed. And if they are meant to separate, we want to make sure that women or men who took a career break, their interests are protected, that they are supported, that they have a cushion until they can find paid work again. And so a lot of this dialogue is to make sure that those interests are protected.
That makes sense. That's really good. Any last piece of advice for a soon-to-be mom or a new mom, or just like if you could tell women something like, take this, put it in your pocket, internalize it, don't forget this, what would that be?
I think the two words right now have given me so much power. Right now, I get to be with my kids. We'll see what comes next. Right now, I'm on a career sprint, seeing this book out into the world. We'll see what comes next, right? Like it works. You make the best right choice for right now. Right now, we need a baby. I mean, right now, we need a babysitter more. We'll see what comes next, right? Like we're investing in help. We're investing in our career. We're investing in chapters at home. We're moving it all around. I think the sense of permanency is terrifying for women. This feeling that it's all or nothing, and we got to decide right now. Instead, we make the best choice for right now, and we'll see what comes next.
I love that. Thank you so much for your work, for your advocacy. I keep thinking about the thing you said about your daughter, that like, may she one day be like, what are you talking about? Was my mom a stay-at-home mom or a working mom? Like, I was loved. I was cared for. My mom did great things. Thank you for your work. Thank you for making the time to be here. I really appreciate it.
Likewise.